Hi, welcome back to another episode of Real-World Serverless, a podcast where I speak with real-world practitioners and get their stories from the trenches. Today, I welcome back Jack Ellis, who is the technical co-founder of Fathom, probably the only analytics competitor to Google Analytics that is GDPR compliant. Is that right? Am I right there, Jack?
We're the only ones I've seen that are doing it properly. Yes.
Good. So yeah, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, great to be back. It's been a few years, hasn't it? You had me on the show in, I want to say 2020, but I don't remember. I think it was 2020.
Yes,
and I learned a lot from you
about
actually.
That.
And it's cool to be back 3 years later.
And you guys have made some pretty interesting changes. Recently, just wrote a blog post about some of the learnings from how you reduce your AWS bill by just $100,000 a year.
Yeah, casual $100,000. It's funny, actually. You know, people looked at the $100,000. That cost is obviously going to be growing as we introduce more features and grow, right? So that I said in the post, or not in the post, but on Twitter, that 100K is going to turn into 300K to 400, 500, 600K. So it was a really cool investment to do in time.
Yeah, I think one of the things you actually mentioned is that these are things that it's just that you don't want to waste money. Maybe it's like some of the small changes you made, like Route 53. It wasn't a colossal saving, but the idea of just spending money and not getting any value for it is that's the thing that drives you to do some of these smaller changes still.
Yeah, I think too, because we're an independent company, we're not spending investor dollars, and so we're thinking about spend optimization. That's what we're focused on. We have to get that right, and so yeah, it's important to us.
Yeah, and the AWS CTO was on stage talking about the frugal cloud engineering, right? So you guys are doing it absolutely the kind of thing that he'll be proud of.
Yeah, no, for sure. They care about total cost of ownership, right? Because then it keeps you with AWS and that sort of thing. But for us, it's huge. We can reallocate those resources, which we're excited for, and yeah.
So since we last time we spoke, I think you guys were going through a period where you were getting a lot of denial of service attacks. So you wrote a blog post about some of the learnings you've made so far. Has there been any updates on that front? Has your strategy shifted? I think before we went on the recording, you mentioned that you don't use the Shield Advance anymore. Now you're mostly just focusing on using WAF. How has that new strategy working for you?
Yeah, it's worked great. It's a whole different approach to deploying web applications that in 2020 I didn't understand. I'd never used a firewall beyond what was there by default, right, in the production application. And sure, we'd done rate limiting with Redis, but that was at that point you're already in the app. We're now talking network level firewalls. And so we're just taking that more seriously. If we're deploying something new, we are going to make sure that we have the firewall in place, that we've got sensible rules, and then just an understanding of what to do if and when we get attacked, right? In 2020, my network was tiny. I couldn't just reach out to people that know how to deal with this stuff, and I didn't know what to do myself. And so thanks to my blogging and thanks to just general networking or even making friends, if we were to get an attack that I was struggling with nowadays, my network is at the point where I know a lot of people, and I also know what to do with the traffic. And we will log. One of the things we mentioned in our DPA is that we will actually log attacks, because we don't do logging. A lot of people do logging by default, so they can then look through the average and things like that. We don't have baseline logs, but we do log an attack when we see malicious behavior coming in WAF, and then we can go and use Athena. We use Kinesis Firehose, and we can use Athena to kind of identify some patterns and then go on the defense. So we're not stuck when we get attacked anymore.
Right, gotcha. So in that case, how would you find out or get alerted when you are experiencing an attack? Do you have some alerts around the number of requests you're receiving or something like that?
Yeah, CloudWatch makes it really easy. I mean, you can do a bunch of stuff in CloudWatch. I'd look at things like the Lambda concurrence, the Lambda BERT, all of those good things from CloudWatch, which you actually get those for free. Even with, I wrote about disabling the logs. You get those for free as part of Lambda and what that costs. And then WAF as well has its own CloudWatch metrics, and you can set up all kinds of notifications. We don't get many, touch wood, but we don't get many. For the most part, we have got good rules in place, but sophisticated attacks do happen, and we have to be aware of it, and we have to respond to it, and we have to know what to do and how to counter those attacks.
Yeah, so since you mentioned it, so let me just bring out my screen. So this blog post I read recently, and that's what so kind of triggered me to ask you to come back on here again. Really good read, and one of the things I think this just brings back so much memories that so many clients that go to their AWS environment and look at their account, look at what they're spending money on. CloudWatch is always in the top three, even for relatively small environments. And I've seen people do exactly what you've done here, disabling Lambda's permission to write to CloudWatch. And what's also funny as well is this tweet you wrote about you're spending $1,000 a month for just the system logs.
Yeah, we don't even log anything, right? Some people log everything. So actually you saying, oh, it's quite expensive, I can actually understand that. The ingest is very expensive. We don't even use it.
So that actually brings another question in that case. In your case, I understand you're not getting any value from your CloudWatch logs because you're not logging anything. So paying all that money just doesn't make any sense. So how do you, in that case, debug your application then? If there's some problems in your Lambda function, you're getting some errors, if you don't have any logs, what did you do to debug them?
Everything's contained within Laravel, like the Laravel application that we run. And we do get errors. We absolutely do. Jobs can fail, that sort of thing. They are sent to Sentry, and then we store failed jobs. Laravel does it automatically, stores it in a database table, and we can retry that job later. Okay. We do care about errors. We absolutely do. We have way less errors nowadays as we're a more mature product, but we don't do this basic logging. A lot of people do that. They like to see every little action. Not every little action, but you know what I mean. We've never had a need to do that. So we just want to know when it breaks. When it breaks, let us know. So this was all pointless to us. Now, This is, if I'm trying to optimize the function performance and I want to profile the functions, I can enable this temporarily, right? But as a baseline, having this running, it's not for me.
Right. Makes sense. And I guess in that case, if you need to enable it, you can also enable it in a lower environment. So, it's not going to suddenly create lots of logs in production. You can just do that in the lower environment, try things out and see if it makes a big difference.
And I will say, I posted the blog on Reddit, and someone was saying that if you switch to JSON logging, you can configure the logs in a better way. So I have written about a way to disable that logging. Do go down the rabbit hole, if someone's listening, do go down the rabbit hole of JSON logs as well, because you can configure it further, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. So Lambda introduced the advanced logging config for Lambda JSON just before reInvent.
So November 23, okay.
That's right, yeah. So it was basically this option where you can change the log config to log JSON. And at that point, there's two other additional things you can do. So Lambda function, CloudFormation. So they got this new logging config option now. So you can say, go to logging config. Once you enable the log format and change it to JSON, then all the system logs that you were paying $1,000 for per month would have a log level. So you can use the system log level to basically filter most of those out. So all the ones that I think you were seeing, like the start and end and report, I think all of those are either debug or info. So if you, at that point, you set the system log level to warm, then you won't see them anymore, but you will still see the errors and things like that will still come through. So I think that's what the people were talking about.
This is good. Yeah. Right. And I think I was working with what we had. We used Laravel Vapor for deployment still. We were set on text. I think this is the future, though. November 23. So that was pretty recent then. But
it's just before reInvent. So this has been a pretty good, interesting change. However, the problem is that these two things are tied together. And so if you are already doing JSON logging yourself, then you may actually have some from your application, you're writing structured logs in JSON. then you may actually have a problem with this new format, because it's going to take your JSON, wrap into another JSON envelope.
Interesting. Okay.
So I really wish they had kind of just separated two things, so that you can have this control for system log level without forcing you to. Yeah, it's kind of weird that it's kind of all tied together as opposed to two separate controls. But in your case, if you're not using CloudWatch, you're not using logs to do your debugging already, then I guess it makes total sense. Another thing I've seen a lot of people do, customers of mine do, is they do the same thing, but the reason why they do it is because they're using a third party like your Datadog or New Relic or whatever. So they're shipping all of their logs there already. So they're paying for data transfer and they're paying for data processing. So it's kind of silly for them to pay for CloudWatch again. So they do the same thing that you've done to disable the Lambda's permission to write to CloudWatch, because they're using Lambda extension to ship all of their logs to whatever service that they're using instead. So that way they kind of avoid the double paying for their logs from the Lambda functions. Yep. But yeah, as soon as they see this, I say, oh, yep, I've been there, seen that before.
Yep.
Yeah, so many times. Another one, which I think is a really common one as well, is also NAT gateway. So tell us about what the setup you had before, and where you are now.
Yeah, so we're really as the product's got more mature, security requirements go up. One of the things that we've accepted up until recently is accessing the database over like a public endpoint. And I mean, this goes back to Heroku days. You create a database and Heroku would let you access it publicly. So it never felt like a big issue to me. But then people were telling me about, was it day one exploits and things like that? I forget what they're called. I don't know. And even though it felt like it was hidden away in this complex endpoint, it still is best to do things privately. So NAT gateway comes in, Redis is going over VPC peering. Wonderful. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll just leave my database. It's fine. A bit of database traffic isn't going to hurt. We saw so much traffic go over the NAT gateway from our database operations, and it was staggering. And so what I did here was I moved our main database over to private link, and suddenly the NAT effectively dropped down to just the cost of having an NAT gateway. We're talking just API requests. And it's funny because a lot of people, I know your crowd of people will understand NAT gateways, and this isn't new to you. A lot of people don't understand NAT gateways. And I even had an email this morning from a CEO of a company in the EU asking me about how NAT gateways work and how they can reduce their traffic going through it. And I said, look, private link and VPC peering. The NAT gateway is to have traffic going out to the internet, but not coming in. That's the whole point of the NAT gateway. So you need to minimize the things that you're sending out to the internet. How do you do that? Private, private, private. So I just wanted to get that into people's heads. Like I say, your circle of people like the Alex DeBrees, that you understand this stuff. You're experts on this stuff. For those of us who aren't experts on this stuff, I just wanted to help those people.
Yeah, honestly, AWS networking takes probably an entire degree to understand.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah,
even people like myself been doing this for years, so we still get it wrong all the time. And debugging network problems is it's just so difficult. There's so many different controls, different layers, and you think you got everything figured out, and then there's there's one small config somewhere else that's blocking your traffic, and that's why you're not getting through. But yeah, NAT is something that a lot of people get caught out on because of the fact that it pays for uptime. And based on the data you transfer that goes through the net, I mean, your example is fairly large number, but the worst one I've ever heard was from I think Corey Quinn. He was talking about a client that was paying something in the order of hundreds of thousands per quarter on NAT gateway, and I think the reason for that is because. Obviously, they got the EC2 or whatever, and I think they're shipping a lot of large video files to S3. And because all the traffic has to go through the net to translate from private to public IP address to hit the S3, so even though the traffic doesn't actually go over public internet infrastructure, but because of it goes through net, you are paying 4.5 cents per gigabyte. And when you're shipping large video files, that adds up really, really quickly. But yeah, so net is one of the things that a lot of people get caught out on because of they're not looking at how much data
Yep.
actually goes through the net.
Tons.
So when I see these numbers, okay, yeah, that's pretty big, but that could be a lot worse.
We had a problem with the NAT gateway before. Laravel Vapor used to have something called separate vendor, and that would be where the vendor files get put into S3, and it was to bypass some Lambda sizing limit. But then when the Lambda container got spun up, that vendor would then be transferred from S3 to the function or something like this. That stung us. I still remember that.
Yeah. That's also loads of I've also run into loads of problems with other things like even VPC endpoints because you can use VPC endpoint, but you have to create a new endpoint per service, and sometimes you just start using a new service in your function, not realizing that I have to add a new VPC endpoint for that specific service. And so suddenly you're getting those networking connectivity issues, and I think in Lambda you just get a timeout because you try to connect but couldn't get through. So the error also is not super clear what the problem is that it was networking.
A note on this too, I was told recently by someone, the VPC peering is better than the private link because the private link has an NLB, which is an extra hop compared to the VPC peering. Yeah, you know this, but it was news to me, and this was a few days ago. So then they're not the same, and I think they're maybe built differently. I'm not sure. They're built differently from the provider, for the provider, sorry, I believe.
Okay. Gotcha. So in this case, are you using RDS or are you running your own database?
No, we're using Single Store now. They have a managed service in US East 1. Yeah, we can't use RDS anymore.
Okay, gotcha. And I think one that was really good that I never really thought about, but once I read this, I thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's just having a good TTL. Most of the time, I just use the default. I think that seems to be reasonable.
Yeah.
But I've also had cases where the default was like 5 minutes for some record sets, depending on what you set up. So I imagine when you've got lots of traffic, enough traffic. Yep. So that's so that's why.
At scale, it becomes more of and it isn't a substantial cost, but it keeps going up, right?
The more users you have, the more this is going to just keep going as your business grows. The one that really intrigued me was this. So you have pretty significant savings by removing SQS and having basically combining two Lambda functions into one. Am I reading it right? Is that what happened here? Okay.
Yeah, ask me, where do you want to go with this? Because I can talk through the story of why this was there in the first place and then why we changed it.
Yes, please. Let's do that.
Yeah, okay. So a long time ago, we were using RDS, and this was before RDS proxy, keep in mind. So we really had to be careful with how many concurrent connections we were throwing at RDS because it would fail. So we had to go, Lambda would be our Laravel app, and then we'd go into SQS, and then we control the concurrency on the actual worker. So this was done back in 2018, 2019. I forget when we did this. So we have moved forward as of 21, and we are now in a position where we actually, we're persisting database connections, and we can have 300,000 or 100,000. I can't even remember how many we can have, but it's way over our concurrency limit in Lambda. And so you have that fact. We no longer have a connection limit issue. And then you also have the fact that it is not a heavy workload happening in the job. This is happening, the minimum time, it can be a few milliseconds, and it can be an average of 50 milliseconds. So we were spending more time on putting a job in the queue, on average, by the way. People didn't like this, and people were saying, oh, that's not expected, and contact the SQS team. SQS is not known for being speedy. It's known for being super, super reliable and resilient. But our average time came down by a ton. I think there's a link there, dropped our Lambda cost. I think it's in that link. You see that link there?
This one?
Yeah, I think I showed the chart and how it drops for the average time. All that we did here was remove SQS. Yeah, here we go. So this is the average time. We were basically going, here SQS, take this job and then run it. This was just the HTTP layer.
Right. So this is the first Lambda function making a call to put a job into
SQS, doing nothing. When you see where it's dropped down, right, in that point, we are actually doing the workload of the job on the HTTP request. And so we do have a fallback. If we can't insert into our database, we will insert into SQS and it will do the insert. But we don't need to use SQS anymore. And the reason is because we have is because we have a multi-AZ database. We didn't have that before. It was a single AZ. Now, that is going to change in the future. We've got a really cool thing. I'm actually, we'll get into this, I'm sure, but I'm looking at Kinesis and looking at ways of kind of syncing to our data warehouse in real time and all kinds of things. But for now, look how quick that is compared to what it was. That's huge savings.
This is actually surprising that the SQS, I think, usually I see about the 50 or so milliseconds, but this is definitely way more than that, especially when you're doing the job already.
I mean, they document it can take into the hundreds of milliseconds.
Okay.
Unless there was something in my config, people have said, oh, that's really weird. I'm so used to seeing 50 milliseconds.
Yeah.
All I'm doing in mine is dispatch into SQS from Laravel. Right. I'm not doing anything special.
Yeah, that's weird. But yeah, this is like I guess you're doing the job. You're querying SQL, you're querying your database already. So this is probably dropped to the 50 or maybe something minus whatever time it takes to do the thing you were doing against the database. So that's probably like 120 millisecond drop.
It's going down even further. We're probably going to be able to get it below 10 milliseconds for the entire job. And now we've got extra concurrency on the HTTP layer from the Lambda as well. So that's awesome. SQS cost has now gone down to close to zero.
Nice. And also, I guess you're saving all of that execution time cost for Lambda. That's why. Is that why you're getting that $20,000 saving from the Lambda cost?
Yeah. So the saving is the speed. So there's a small savings from there's one less request per page view and event that comes in, and then looking at. I think we did a sum. I forget how I calculated that. I did a sum of the amount of time the functions were taking, and I compared that to what they're going to take now with the average. So that was cost savings on that. Yeah. But also, so before I was doing, 150 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds to put the job in, you've then got whatever's happening in the background as well. Now, in this background job, it wasn't just that 40 milliseconds you see. There were more interactions with SQS that took a ton of time, and I couldn't work out what's going on there. The job comes in, right? It triggers the Lambda, but then we have to delete the job from SQS, or at least in our setup we did. So we used Sentry to profile it. And it wasn't a cold start. I cleared that up. We had a chunk here and a chunk at the end, chunk at the start, chunk at the end. And that was SQS time. SQS for our workload added latency. Your mileage may vary, but for us with Laravel and how we were doing it, we were seeing increased latency. So we've cut all of that off.
Okay. That's actually.
I don't even know if I factored that into my savings. I can't even remember. That's actually probably extra savings.
So maybe more than 40,000 then.
Yeah.
So in that case, you must be, for you to make this much saving from Lambda invocations, so you must be running a pretty high number of concurrent executions for your Lambda functions.
Yeah, we do lots of processing.
Okay. Can you share what kind of a ballpark number? Are we talking about tens of thousands requests per second? Well, concurrent executions, or is it much more than that?
No, like around that. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I think a lot of people would say is that, okay, when you're running at that kind of scale, would it make more sense for you to move your code into containers so that it's even more cost efficient than your Lambda functions?
Yeah, this comes up all the time. And these people may be right, by the way. I'll come back in 3 years and I'll say, I look at Lambda as the most hands-off thing available from AWS. I had a consultant sit with me and go through EC2 auto-scaling. And it looked amazing. All the stuff you can do, spinning up new containers and everything. But what happens when it goes wrong? And it might be my lack of experience with that particular service that you might turn around and say, what do you mean? It won't go wrong. You're going to be fine. But right now, I'm completely hands-off with Lambda. I never get paged at 2 a.m. and have to wake up and turn my computer on and try and fix things. I get this feeling of EC2 that it's more... It requires more from me or from team members. And at that point, I then think, okay, well, it's not a managed service. So AWS aren't handling it. It's on me if something goes wrong. I don't want to be on call. So I'm going to have to hire people in different areas of the world so they can have 24/7 coverage. And then that becomes top tier DevOps are going to cost a lot of money. We don't want to do that. And so until we can get Lambda close to what it would cost us for 2 to 3 full-time DevOps engineers, we're not going to consider it. Subject to change, by the way. I try to keep an open mind with this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people often forget about, and that's why when I talk about cost, I often bring up the whole total cost of ownership because you can save I don't know $500 per month from your Lambda invocations from your Lambda cost by moving to containers. But then if you got to hire a guy for 10 grand a month, then you're minus 9,500 per month down on your total cost of ownership. But because one is they're going to different budgets, so I think a lot of times people don't look at it the same way because one goes to staffing, one goes to your operational cost. But yeah, as a business owner, it totally makes sense for you to be thinking about, and I think you're doing it right to be thinking about the total cost of ownership, not just in terms of staffing, but also in terms of the amount of cognitive workload and just burden and stress that you're going to put on yourself and your team.
As a business owner, that exactly. Engineers talk about self-hosting things. I don't self-host anything. Dude, we are literally, I just yesterday, I killed one of our EC2s that was handling some redirects and I've moved it to CloudFront. It took a bunch of work, certificate provisioning and all that CloudFront functions to redirect, but I don't want to manage anything. We don't self-host a single, I think we have one self-hosted thing. No, we're killing that as well. We don't self-host anything. We would always pay a premium because, like you say, all the stress and the maintenance, it's not worth it for us. Total cost of ownership is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad we're on the same page. And you mentioned earlier that you're now using WAF to do more and more things. So this WAF savings, this is quite a big cost for WAF. Is that mostly made up of the request cost?
This is a work in progress, right? Here's what we're thinking. There are CDN providers out there that will offer you a built-in firewall, and they'll offer you per second rate limiting versus the 5-minute. We're still using WAF, so this is why I put work in progress. But if we were to drop WAF, we could do that instead. I'm mixed on this because we are exploring Kinesis and CloudFront can tie into that. But this is a work in progress, and it's something that we're discussing with other vendors at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, that's also something that I also sort of thought about in the past as well, that the whole 100 requests per 5 minutes, that's the lowest you can get, which is still kind of a lot for someone who wants to DDoS you with like a botnet. Sure, that's like 100 requests per 5 minutes, but if you multiply by, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000, that's still a lot of requests you have to ingest.
No, absolutely. WAF has got way better since we spoke however many years ago. They're now doing these invisible challenges. They now do capture. I think they realized that Cloudflare were doing a bunch of stuff, which is really cool to see WAF step up. I will say here, if someone is using a WAF and they're doing more than $3,000 a month spend, don't forget Shield Advanced because they include those costs in the subscription. Just remember that.
Right. Yes. And you also mentioned that the CloudFront itself is just not very economical. And so what are you guys doing now in terms of a CDN? Have you moved to, I think you mentioned the Bunny before, or CDN 77?
Yeah,
is that the way you're looking at?
We are currently using Bunny as our CDN for our ingest. This CloudFront one is actually on our API. I was seeing all this traffic from EU Island, and I'm thinking, why is that? Why is that so high compared to US East or to anywhere else in the world? And it turned out we were serving like a blocked IPs payload to some infrastructure we have in Germany with a separate cloud provider. And that was really, really expensive. And the debugging process I did here is what I wanted to share with the world. How I went into the popular objects and I go, oh, that's weird. That many, what was it, 100 million requests a month? That's insane. And so that was 4 terabytes a month. And so we had to work out what to do there. The solution is actually to bring in the EU infrastructure into AWS, and we're going to be writing more about why and how in the future.
Okay, so the reason for that is because you got some infrastructure with a different cloud provider running in the EU, but have to access. Okay, I see.
There was a bunch of legislation stuff that happened with rulings, and then we had to move EU traffic to Hetzner. But then you've seen recently there's now a new framework or agreement in place, and everything's calmed down again. We basically are on the cutting edge of compliance, and we will move where the regulations take us. Right now, we're good to take it all into AWS, and we're very happy. So,
okay. So in that case, would you recommend other? Because I think you mentioned the Cloudflare earlier. Would you say Cloudflare is also a good option? I think more people will be using Cloudflare than say Bunny, for example.
Yes. No one really wants to talk about Cloudflare being bad because it saved a lot of people's There's a lot of people's websites from DDoS attacks. I explored Cloudflare Workers, and the sales experience was so hyper aggressive that me and my co-founder were furious, trying to be coerced and scared into getting an enterprise contract with them. All the hairs on my back went up, and I'm not going to be scared or intimidated into purchasing an enterprise agreement. It was more of this thing of, the business plan isn't suitable for mission critical workloads. If things go down, you're on your own. And I thought, you have the audacity to do this whilst your services are literally offline. Your whole dashboard, for days, I think it was having issues. The sales process just pushed us away, and we are very people focused. We aren't just about the tech. We're about our trust in the company as well. I have had people from Cloudflare quite high up reach out to me and apologize for what happened. But then I literally get an email. So we say I think it was December. I want to say early December. We're done. We have a misalignment in values. We don't share values. I then get an email in January asking if I've changed my mind, and I go, "Are you kidding me?" And then they're commenting on my LinkedIn page, and it was so excessive, and I don't like that hyper aggressive sales route. And so the salespeople said, if it's mission critical, you need enterprise. Okay, so I need a huge contract and commit to a year in order to have decent infrastructure. AWS doesn't do that. I can go and deploy something multi-AZ without signing we don't have a huge contract with AWS. The only time we ever did was AWS Shield Advanced. We pay month to month. So the sales pushed us away. Cloudflare Workers, that's honestly, the Cloudflare Workers is overhyped, I think, unless you are doing, I think AI workloads, that is a great example where you're having to wait for those network requests. That new model is really cool for that. For us though, we're talking about like a millisecond on Redis, a millisecond, and then it would be longer because Cloudflare Workers wouldn't be able to do VPC peering or any kind of private networking stuff, would it? I don't know how that works. Maybe it would. This is a bit of my ignorance here. But anywho, we're talking a few milliseconds. So I actually looked at it. Cloudflare Workers per millisecond, I'm pretty sure it's more than Lambda. And so if we haven't got that huge network latency, we're not worried about how long, we're not worried about that extra billing, because Lambda does it per millisecond. Cloudflare's Workers new pricing does it per CPU millisecond. And I don't know how much you've gone down that rabbit hole, and if you've compared the pricing. I thought Cloudflare Workers was way cheaper, and it's not. Especially if you're getting told that mission critical workloads have to go through an enterprise contract. It's expensive.
Yeah, so I've read about it before, just briefly, that they only charge you when you're actually running in CPU. So if your Cloudflare worker is going to fetch some data from the KV store or whatever, those network idle time, you don't pay for them, and that's why they charge you only for CPU time as opposed to execution time. So I thought that would mean that the Cloudflare workers will be even cheaper, or maybe
that's what you think. Yeah, instinctively, that's what you think.
So are you saying that from your testing, that's just not how it works?
So I want to say a few days ago, I actually looked at the Cloudflare Workers pricing side by side with Lambda pricing, and it wasn't as substantial as you might think.
Okay.
So if we look at Cloudflare, where's the new model? Standard. Yeah, per additional CPU millisecond. So forget the free tiers a second. So they charge 2 cents per million CPU. So
hold on, let me see if we can bring up the pricing page on my screen and see if we're looking at the right thing. Okay, share screen. So this is the page I'm looking at now for workers. CPU time. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm just looking now. If we were to take a per millisecond cost, can you follow, if you're on the Cloudflare Workers standard pricing page, this is the new pricing, right?
Right.
If you can follow along with me and check my maths here. So I've done 0.02 divided by a million. Or actually, it's probably better to take AWS's pricing and roll it up. Let's take ARM, so let's do times 1.
Let's go to Lambda pricing, and then we go to...
So yeah, AWS is 13.3 cents per million milliseconds. If you go down to ARM and then 1024. Oh, you're doing it. Okay, you're doing it
Ah,
I
okay.
was doing it. Yeah, that's the same thing.
Yeah, that's a per gigabyte second.
So times that by 1 million to get a comparison with the Cloudflare worker pricing.
So 13 cents. Am I doing it right?
And now look at what cloud is it 13 cents? No, that's gigabyte second. Do the go to the millisecond, scroll down.
Okay, hold on.
Go to the table. I was multiplying their millisecond pricing
this one
on the ARM. Okay. Go to the ARM and then 1024. Multiply that by a million.
Okay, 1.3 cents.
No, so that so that's 13 cents, isn't it? Or is that 1.3
cents? Yeah, 1.3 cents. Versus,
so that's less
cents.
than what Cloudflare is charging.
Right. But Cloudflare only charges you for actual CPU time as opposed to Lambda, which is the execution time.
Which is all of it. So basically, when you've got those high latency requests, like AI is a great example. Say you're using DALI or something like that. Right. Great example of where Cloudflare workers really make sense. For our workload, though, it's not that substantial of a difference.
Right. And I guess even for the AI workload, you probably don't want to be waiting for the whole request to come back. And that's where things like Lambda's function URL, and you can do response streaming, so you can start to stream responses back to the caller. Mm-hmm. So I guess in that case, you probably don't want to be waiting, 10 seconds before you respond the whole thing.
No, that's a good point.
So maybe that's also maybe something to think about as well, I guess. Plus,
Lambda is also Lambda's 20 cents per million request, and Cloudflare workers is 30 cents.
Okay. Okay.
But anyway, I'm not having a massive go at them. Okay, I'll have a massive go at Cloudflare for their sales, their aggressive sales. Really disappointed in that. Very mad at the time. But Cloudflare is great for a lot of people. But if I'm told that it's not suitable for mission critical services unless I spend, I forget how much we were going to spend, then we're going to walk away. We're not going to be coerced or manipulated into signing a contract. You brought up Cloudflare. You just relit all of the fury. But no, whatever. They help a lot of people. It's not for us, and I'm being a bit vocal about that.
Okay, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, obviously, for a lot of the things that I've done in the past, I would never running at such a high scale that I need to go anywhere near that level of pricing. So instead of Cloudflare, have you looked at other CDNs like Fastly or other? You mentioned Bunny before, but would you consider Bunny to be a good partner? Yes, you continue to grow and have more and more throughput.
Yeah, Bunny's all right. They're okay. They do the job. Fastly feels too enterprisey, and I haven't got past much of them at all. I kind of get a block every time I open up their website. I get blocked. CDN 77.
CDN 77.
They are doing a lot of revenue, and they're well established and have been for a long time, based in the EU. And I believe Bunny actually runs a lot of their stuff on top of CDN 77. They've got a really nice team. I've had them reach out to me a few times. Yeah, very appealing.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, here's the thing, though. I think it was me and you that spoke about this. CloudFront is absolutely amazing. For our workload, though, we're having loads of requests. CDN 77 and Bunny don't bill on requests. They bill on data transferred. Because CloudFront's billing on requests, it becomes, we're spending $4,000 for 4 billion requests a month, right? And that, I talked to you before. I don't think we were recording, but one of the reasons why we only increased our base plan after however many years by $1 is because we are keeping our costs down on ingest. And yeah, look at this. So you go to see pricing, and they're charging unlimited HTTPS requests. I wish CloudFront did that. So we could get we could do it for $199. We do less than 6 terabytes of traffic on ingest, I believe. Even if it's 385, who cares, right? And they're really, these folks are really good, just with a lot of things.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That you want to find services that prices in the right dimension that that grows with your business.
Yeah,
I think with CloudFront, so they got a data transfer
down
out
a little bit. Keep going.
There's the request count as well. Okay, there you go. Requests. Okay,
per 10,000 HTTPS.
10,000. So if you're getting for your use case, you probably have a quite small packets for every view, but then you've got a lot of view data you have to collect. So the pricing dimension probably just doesn't work for you.
1,000 per
I've
billion.
Yes. Okay. So I've worked in the this sports streaming platform before, where they're streaming a live football match to millions of concurrent users and things like that. So for them, the bulk of their cost is not in the request count, but in the actual data transfer.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
for them, for them to grow their business, they probably want to look for CDNs that grows more with the data transfer cost more efficiently. But absolutely, for you, I think this makes sense that you want to find services that grows, well, the charges based on the data transfer and not on the request, because you've got lots of the small requests. So in total, you don't have that much of data transfer.
Well, that's it. I mean, think about that. The customer you just spoke about, they do 4 billion high bandwidth requests, right? And they're paying the same request cost as us. And so yeah, CloudFront have obviously priced it this way for a reason, but it doesn't work for us, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I also see. We'll see.
I also see. I don't know if you've been looking at the Memento guys. They've been doing some really good stuff.
I was on a call with their CEO on Monday. They're smashing it. They're definitely one to watch. Okay, he talked me through their infrastructure and some of the stuff and how they build it, and they literally have unlimited connections, and what they're doing is nuts. The guy's ex Dynamo DB lead or something.
Yeah,
so this
Kavaja. He used to lead the Dynamo DB team. Yeah, I know him.
Okay,
we've done quite a few things together. But yeah, the topic stuff is so interesting. I looked at I've been doing a lot of WebSocket stuff with say AppSync or API Gateway, and if you look at the pricing for things like AppSync, for real time data for real time updates, it's not charging you awful lot for million updates. But this is the thing that I think is going to sting a lot of people when you grow with your number of users that are connected to your service to get real-time updates, 8 cents per million minutes of connection. Whereas these guys just give you that connection time for free.
He was talking about something like you can potentially connect directly to something. You wouldn't need a web server. You could have a device connect directly to the stream, or I forget exactly what it was, but yeah, they're absolutely smashing it, and so it's funny you bring them up.
Yeah. So again, I think it's another example of services that that you can find that priced in the dimension that makes more sense to you, as opposed to just using what's the easiest thing to do when you need to scale your business. And sometimes it's not so much about just moving from serverless to running containers, but it's just finding the right partner who's got the right pricing structure for the service.
Yeah, I mean, another one that comes up, PlanetScale, if you're wanting to do loads of connections, right? RDS kind of gets funny with the connections. PlanetScale, they have ridiculous amounts of connections. They've moved away from the serverless model, but they're doing the Scalar Pro thing.
Scalar Pro, okay.
The connections you get are ridiculous. So they work well with serverless workloads. 3 AZs out of the box, which is ridiculous.
Where did they say connections? I'm not.
Go down to compare all plans. It might be in there. They've changed it around, but concurrent connections. So 10,000 concurrents, and then you get up to unlimited. You remember RDS out of the box before. You remember it before RDS proxy.
That's right. Yeah. So I remember me and Jeremy and a bunch of other people. I think Jeremy Daly actually wrote a blog post way back about. I still got it in my history.
I read it. I was reading this last week, I think.
Yeah, all the things you have to do to just make sure that you don't run out of connections and you can't connect to your database anymore. The next Lambda instance you've got. Yep. Yeah. So this is all before service proxy, and I guess nowadays, even I think with RDS proxy, you still have some upper limit on the number of connections you can have. So did you say that now is was this 30,000
on RDS proxy? I have no idea.
Okay.
But I know that I like going towards services that have higher connection limits for our workload at the moment. I could talk about single store and everything else. I've not used RDS proxy. This came out after my time with RDS.
Okay, right. So now there's a
grapevine.
So now you just say you use a single store.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've not actually used them before.
So it's hybrid workloads. It's OLAP, but also OLTP workloads as well, all in the same place. It's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. So
we have billions. Think about how many rows we have in our database, right? Tens of billions, plus all of Google Analytics data there. We have Bootstrap CSS as a customer. So imagine how long they've been about and how much traffic they've got, and that coming into the database, and we're having to perform queries on that. Single store has been really good for that.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
ClickHouse
because
comes up a lot. We've explored ClickHouse as well. Not as good as Single
ClickHouse.
Store.
Okay.
You've heard of ClickHouse, right?
No, not used them before.
Cloudflare use them for logs, but they're not as good as Single Store. You can't do things like updates as well. Single Store's got a really cool structure.
So it is still using relational model, or is this more MySQL compatible? It says there.
Yeah, sort of, but both. I guess.
Both,
yeah, it is relational data. Yeah, but you can do key value,
key values,
NoSQL workloads and JSON in the database, that sort of thing.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of relational database stuff, so I haven't had to explore that particular space. I knew about the PlanetScale. They were making a lot of noise, but I remember there was like a time, I want to say about 7-8 years ago, there was this whole new SQL hype. There's a lot of Orient DB and a few other things that pop up around that time, but they kind of just slowly died away. Never really make too much of a bang.
Yeah.
So,
dude, MongoDB, people still use MongoDB.
Oh yeah. People
I
still use
laughed
MongoDB.
my ass off. I thought it was a meme. I honestly, you go back to like when Mongo, there was something that happened when I was a kid. I can't remember what it was. It was Mongo losing data or something happened at a startup. And that is imprinted in my head. And then I'm finding out that MongoDB is still ridiculously popular. And I go, what? It's a meme database, like that web scale meme, right? But no, they're popular.
So they, I remember that incident. That was quite a few years ago. I think that was before MongoDB. I think it was version 2. There was a big incident. I remember the specific one that you mentioned. It was something to do with, I think the way they do something. I think the default consistency level or something like that.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah. That it was. As soon as the request left the local box, it's okay. It's all thumbs up. So it hasn't been replicated, haven't been received on the server.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you everything's good, and so you would just quietly lose data without even knowing. So that's nerve-wracking. Pretty crazy.
Things like that leave an imprint on you. And I was young. This was a long time ago.
Yeah, this was quite a long time ago. But I remember it was a massive thing. But then I think they did. I think they kind of recovered. The reputation recovered over time, and like I said, people are still using it. But
loads of people, dude.
I do think compared to things like Dynamo DB, it's a lot easier to use, and I think that the ease of use is actually a bad thing. I actually really like the Dynamo DB for the fact that it's quite constrained in terms of what you do. So you know exactly what you can do and when you shouldn't use it anymore. Whereas with MongoDB, I've had a case in the past where someone was putting nested arrays, arrays of inside arrays into this object, and then they were doing like a search or something like that, or implementing search. So no surprise, as soon as you hit like 100,000 objects, the search just became super slow, and the CPU just went up to 100% every time. You can, it lets you do all these crazy things that's so easy, but it's just never going to scale.
I love Dynamo DB. I mean, if it was cheaper, I'd use it for a lot more things in our application. We're not priced to use it at scale. A lot of people are, but great technology. Really, really like it.
So are you using Dynamo DB with on-demand, or are you using provision?
We're not using it at all. No, I mean, I've only ever used it on demand. We had a great use case where we had a fleet of servers around the world, and we had Caddy running, and Caddy was doing our SSL certificates, and Dynamo DB was our store for that. It was so great because then you knew you had this availability. You didn't have to rely on the local file system of the EC2s, and then you could get the certificates instantly if you needed them from Dynamo DB. And that was really cool.
Yeah, it does get expensive, but I think if your traffic is relatively stable, you can probably get some decent savings and bring it down to at least to something more reasonable. If you use a provision, then probably, I think do they have like a saving plan? I thought they have a saving plan for Dynamo DB.
I am not sure, but a lot of people don't know about how good Dynamo DB is. I've heard talks of Dynamo DB is a tier 1 database. If AWS are building internally, that's the database they use, and that they're not actually supposed to or allowed to use RDS. Not because it's bad, but because Dynamo DB is so much better and it's the top database internally.
I know it's a tier 1 service. I didn't realize that they can't use RDS internally.
They're not using RDS on Amazon.com, right?
Okay,
they're using
interesting.
Dynamo DB.
Yeah, and I remember every now and then the Black Friday or something, just a big sales event, they talk about how Dynamo DB handles like 100 million requests per second or something silly like that.
Okay, but it's because of those limitations. You mentioned Mongo not having limits. Dynamo DB is built in a certain way to handle ridiculous consistent scale. You do get limitations like, hot shards or hot partitions or keys or whatever it is.
Yeah, but yeah, totally. Dynamo DB is a constraint. Is what makes it so scalable.
Absolutely.
And Kavaja was the guy that was leading that team. So that's why he's doing some really good things on the Memento.
They're definitely intrigued. I won't be surprised if we start using them at some point. So we'll see.
So everyone's doing AI stuff. Have you guys looked into potentially integrating some AI features into Fathom?
No, loose thoughts around how we could do stuff with the stats. I do have concerns about sending off data to a big AI company. We would have to do that somehow privacy friendly. Wouldn't just transfer your traffic, or if you've got a personal site, we're not going to casually send that over to an AI. There may be ways of doing it where we allow customers to opt in and then they choose to do that, but it is a tricky thing to navigate. We are looking at surfacing more information about your analytics. We are looking into that. Not through AI, but just in terms of telling you what's happening, telling you if your content's picking up, that sort of thing, and actually giving you actionable insights. Because people want to know what to do. They've got analytics on the website. What can I do with that? How can I grow my business? How can I grow my audience? We're really wanting to get into helping people do that, even through case studies. And I've got a few ideas in my head that we're gonna really dial into that after version 4. We've got a few things that people are going to enjoy once we have that out the door.
Okay, looking forward to that as a customer.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
And so, I think that's all the questions that I had in mind. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? I know you've had your Laravel course. How's that coming along?
Yeah, I mean, I retired my Laravel course and my single store course because I couldn't market and support them. But I've had a few people ask me if I could open them back up. I'm probably just going to put them somewhere and just say they're there. But I'm not actively selling those anymore. Fathom keeps me way too busy. I'm blogging on there. No, I'm curious to ask you. I am thinking about going down that Kinesis fire hose into S3, and then single store has this feature called pipelines, which can effectively read through S3 and run it through stored procedures and sync it into my database at high scale. And then we remove any kind of connections coming back and forth, and there's less overhead. What do you think of that idea?
I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of companies that do use Kinesis firehose for ingesting, clickstream events, and Kinesis is one of the most scalable and probably cost-efficient services at ingesting data at large quantities in AWS. So from what I know, I think all of the billing events that AWS processes and they used for to decide how much to charge you is all goes through internally, goes through Kinesis. And I think even Netflix, they don't do it anymore, but I think a couple of years ago, they were still using Kinesis data streams, not Firehose, but ultimately it's a similar technology internally for collecting all of those clickstream events, for their scale. Even for that, I think they were only running about 100 something shards, which is not an awful lot in terms of a cost. So Kinesis, but I guess the question will be more, okay, in terms of the ingestion pipeline, how do you get data into Kinesis, from website? Do you, still hit something in the edge first and then have some way to then put data into Kinesis Firehose? That's probably the bit that I'm not sure what's the best way to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm looking into a few things at the moment and just thinking, is there a way, if CloudFront ties into it, but it makes things more scalable and easier, then we would suck it up and just pay the extra cost for CloudFront. Definitely exploring this at the moment. I just love the idea of single store handling the synchronization from S3, because then we could take our database offline temporarily and it's still going into S3, right? That just appeals to me so much.
Yeah, and it also makes it easier for you to then do other things later as well. You can use it with Glue, with Athena. There's just other ways for you to ingest and process that data once you have them all in one inside in S3.
We get poked as well, and people say, "Oh, you could do this," but there'd be a delay in it being on the dashboard. Our customers, and you can argue forever about whether it's got business value. Our customers like having real-time stats, so there is business value. We're not willing to take that away. Whereas other people, the ETL or whatever, that can be hours into the future. They really don't care. I've been on calls where people are in charge of billing at large CDN companies, and it doesn't matter as long as they have it by a certain date in the month, right? That's not us. We want real-time data. So we've got a few things to factor in there.
Yeah, with Kinesis Firehose, in that case, I think you do get a buffering and all of that, so you may still have some delay. But yeah, like I think they just removed it. They give the option to have no buffering, or at least just a few seconds, so you can still be soft real time. And I think for web analytics, that's absolutely
we'd be
fine.
We'd be there in milliseconds, right, to get to that buffer limit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They get a buffer, the basic buffer, the buffer, megabytes hint.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah, you got enough traffic to just hit that all the time.
No, absolutely.
Okay,
cool, man.
Sounds good. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I guess in that case they're not doing the course anymore. Any others? I guess just going to be focusing on Fathom and not going to do any other things.
Yeah, I was so busy on Fathom, and people still want me to write, and I like writing them. Who am I kidding? Like, the technical content, CTOs, software engineers, I love that. Thousands of people are now on my newsletter, which is like a free newsletter that I just email when I have a new article. I love that. Growing Fathom's grown every single month since we started, and we're still going, and Fathom's still taking a lot of market share away from Google. Obviously, Google's huge, so we're going to be chipping at that for years to come. But we're going at it and just making the product better and better. Version 4 is going to be awesome. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
So how big is the engineering team nowadays at the Fathom?
2 full-time people.
That's pretty crazy. Building a system like that with just 2 people.
Biggest thing we're learning though is that we have to, one thing at a time. Don't start that next thing until this PR has been merged. We've been in a position where we had teams built, like team functionality, 90% built, and then the PR stayed stale, which is my fault. It was stale for so long that it became not compatible with all the stuff we'd done. And so now we're having to rebuild that kind of from the ground up. So we're changing a lot of things in how we operate because we want to make the most use of the team we've got, because neither me nor my co-founder want a big team. We've been clear about that from the start. The team we've got, full-time support, full-time engineers, full-time design and marketing. It's a good, all of that is a small group of people that we're able to do it with. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to be efficient. Don't want to keep hiring people, but we'll see what happens. Never say never. But for now,
that makes a lot of sense, and I think that really aligns with your what you said earlier about not wanting to babysit any servers and just want to things to be just run themselves and be completely self-sufficient without you having to
be a manager. I don't want to be a manager. I like working with people, but I don't want to have to promote myself out of the work I enjoy doing. I love coding. I'm not an entrepreneur in the sense that I'm going to start managing people. Neither is my co-founder. If he wasn't designing and writing copy, he wouldn't enjoy his work. So that's what we're focused on.
Okay, so last question then. Where can people find your newsletter? I'm trying to look for it, but I'm not able to find it.
Go on to jackellis.me.
Okay, Jack Ellis.
And then the newsletter's at the bottom. That's my personal developer's newsletter. Really boring and bland. That's the place to go if you want to hear about my technical content. I write about a bunch of stuff. They're quite long blog posts, as you know, but yeah, I've written about a bunch of stuff. And then use fathom.com/blog, and then click onto the technical category, and that's where I pretty much live.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I know of the Fathom blog. I didn't know about your newsletter.
Yeah, man.
Okay, all right. I'll put those links in the description so anyone watching this can go ahead and sign up to those, and also check out the Fathom as well. I'm a customer. I've been a customer for quite a few years. Really happy with it. Awesome. Especially for those of us who are conscious about the GDPR and staying compliant. So yeah, and amazing work that you guys have done, especially with such a small team. I think that's real testament of the kind of superpower that serverless gives you to be able to build really large scale systems without having to hire a whole army of people just to look after your infrastructure.
I agree. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
No worries. Best of luck. Take care. Okay. See you.
See you, mate.